just took a poll yesterday that we'll update everyone on. We were looking for the most hated man in college football. We hope there aren't too many people out there taking that literally, but in a sports context, hated person. And after a few hundred votes, Deion Sanders was leading the way at that point. When you're loved, you're hated, and vice versa. So I'm sure he would also be, I believe, the most loved figure in college football. So let's start there. This is a guy, and it was stated by one of our guests this week very well, that aside from the sport, he is the most independently famous person in the sport of college football. Everybody else, it's dependent on their job. Kirby Smart, Nick Saban previously, it's all Deion Sanders. He's already built up this celebrity. So do you think he's been effective in terms of separating celebrity versus what he needs to do to be a full-time head coach there, and whether that's workable in the future?
I think he hasn't separated it, but I think it's a good thing that he hasn't, right? I think his celebrity is what helped generate all the buzz when they went 3-0 last year. I think his celebrity is what gets people like The Rock or Offset or like Terrell Owens or all these famous people on campus at Colorado. And when you're a program like Colorado that doesn't have the endless NIL funds, I think you have to use the other resources that you have. And so Deion Sanders being so famous is a resource, whether people want to admit it or not. And so I think it's probably better that he hasn't separated his fame from Colorado, because he's generating more attention and more sort of buzz about Colorado. They increased the amount of applicants they received. The local economy has boomed ridiculously, and Colorado gets primetime TV games all the time. So I feel like he hasn't, but I feel like it's a good thing that he hasn't.
Yeah, you make a great point there. It's difficult for them to be relevant in this college football world. Of course, they were 30 years ago and winning a national championship and having a long run of success, but this is a different deal. So what else catches people's attention? Of course, we've got College Football Nation not being able to track these teams every day and get the granular of what's being worked on, but it's more about, okay, this went viral. This is a situation. This was a comment, and then that defines the program. And of course, the latest that I've come across is the comment about, here's Shedeur, we don't touch him. Here, Travis Hunter, we don't touch him. We operate like an NFL team. And that seems to be something else that he's selling, is that we're bringing the NFL to college football and we're going to run it like a business.
I feel like a lot of the times we talk about Deion Sanders, we're reading into a lot of what he does, probably a little too much, which is fine because he's so polarizing. But yeah, I think it's smart to talk about Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter like that. Realistically, most teams across college football don't want their quarterbacks getting hit in practice. The only program that I personally know of that sort of allows contact was Utah. They'll do like a full contact camp every once in a while. I don't think they're doing it this year actually, but there's really, I think it's smart of him to sort of set the tone of like, hey, although we're not in the NFL, we are treating this like we are in the NFL. That is the goal for everyone on the team, to make it to the NFL. So I think he's just treating his team like what he knows. He knows pro football. He knows that he wasn't allowed to touch the quarterbacks. He knows that the best players got days off. Like Travis Hunter played the most snaps in college football last year, and he missed 3 games from injury. So you want to keep Travis healthy. You want to keep Shedeur healthy. And so I think the team sort of has an understanding of that. I think it just obviously we sort of associate those 2 players as being his favorites, but they happen to be their best players. And so you want to protect your best players. You want to protect your investments, if you will. And then they obviously have a lot of NFL coaching experience or NFL experience on their coaching staff. They have Warren Sapp out there. They have a few other guys. Robert Livingston spent like a decade in the NFL. He's now the defensive coordinator, Pat Shurmur. So they sort of know what they're doing in terms of ushering in an NFL culture. And so I don't mind it as long as everyone's improving still, and as long as everyone's sort of getting the necessary reps. I think everything's fine.
Kevin Borb is here to break down some Colorado football for us, coming off 4-8, but of course that was a 3-game improvement from the previous season. And you can catch Kevin's work at Athlon Sports and the Locked On Network. So let's get to the football. Shedeur Sanders gains a lot of attention for other things, and his connection there with Deion, of course, his father, but he is one of the most accurate passers in college football and did a remarkable job leading his team considering offensive line woes. And once the Flash succumbed to depth issues and offensive line issues, and they started to lose games, then people started to focus on, oh, this isn't necessarily a strong football team and a sturdy football team top to bottom. So Dylan Edwards moves to Kansas State. Dallin Hayden, of course, one of the big pickups. Your assessment of the offense and whether they have fortified themselves up front where it counts.
Yeah, I think they've more than fortified themselves up front. Realistically, that offensive line last year was probably the worst in the country. They gave up like 50, I think it's 5 sacks total. Shedeur Sanders was sacked like 52 times, if I'm not mistaken. So he was sacked a lot. I think it really limited what they were able to do on offense. They couldn't run the ball. And so you kind of had an offense where everyone knew what was coming, and Shedeur Sanders was still able to throw 27 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, with all 3 of his interceptions being late in games or tipped. So the new offensive line, they bring in around, I think they just added a new one yesterday, a new offensive lineman yesterday. So I think they have around 12 new offensive linemen. A lot of these guys played well at their previous stop, and they have an opportunity to sort of curate a new offense. Like realistically, they're going to have a new offense with Pat Shurmur anyway, but they have an opportunity to sort of establish the run. They have an opportunity to develop play action passes. And so I think for Shedeur Sanders and just people in general, like you have to realize he put up those big numbers with a terrible offense line. So if this group can be just average, I'd be a little scared if I was an opposing defense.
So, Kevin, can you run down the other offensive weapons and who's back and who's new?
Yeah, so at receiver, we obviously have Travis Hunter. He's playing both ways. They bring in a receiver from Vanderbilt named Will Shepherd, who's about 6'3", 6'4". He's massive. Even though it was Vanderbilt, he put up some pretty big numbers in the SEC, and he's already someone that has been making some noise over there in Boulder. They have LeJohntay Wester, who came in from Florida Atlantic, and I think he was first or second in the country in catches. He had over 100 catches last year. He's probably the fastest player, if not on the team, in the country. He's one of the just quickest guys out there. Him and Shedeur Sanders have already built a rapport. He was actually, I'm sure everyone has seen it, he was the receiver in the edited video on social media the other day where everyone thought it was 2 separate clips. Just a weird social media sort of risk, I would say, by Colorado, but it wasn't edited. And then they also have Jimmy Horn returning, who he was electric for them last year as well. So they have a lot of speed, a lot of size, and then they have a few freshmen and underclassmen transfers who haven't played much, but are expected to have some sort of impact. So it's Cordell Russell from TCU. He's like 6'3". He's built. He's ginormous. They have Draylon Miller, who's a 4-star recruit in this past class. So they have a lot of weapons all over the place. And then their running back room is pretty stout as well. So Colorado's offense, I imagine, will be one of the more prolific ones in college football.
Myself and just about anyone who loves college football got very familiar with their personnel the first 4 weeks of the season when they were in the spotlight, when we were watching every game. And I got to say, I kind of lost track once they got mired in this losing streak.
Right.
And I should put my phone on silence every time I go to air. And of course, I have yet to do my deep dive on Colorado. So thanks for stopping by, Kevin. Appreciate you breaking things down. Jackson, thank you so much for dropping Kevin's X account link in the chat. It's right there in the chat. It's down below if you want to copy that and follow Kevin's work at Athlons and Locked On. The defense, of course, was horrific as well.
Yep.
What are the additions and changes that bring some hope on that side of the ball?
Yeah, so similar to the offensive line, they brought in probably what's going to be a completely new defensive line. They brought in guys like Deion Hayes from Pitt, who was a key player for Pitt. He was a starter, Pittsburgh native or Pennsylvania native, and was someone that Pitt was really hoping could help them contend for something this year. And I don't know if everyone's familiar, but he was the transfer that was like, I'm leaving because I don't think we could contend. And then he ended up transferring to Colorado. So he obviously thinks very highly of Colorado. They have a guy named Chidozie Nwankwo from Houston who he's a defensive tackle that's like 5'11 and 295 pounds ish, but he's a ball of muscle, former high school state champion at wrestler. So he's very physical. They brought in a ton of talent just all over the place. They took a flyer on a couple of former blue chip recruits that really hadn't played. And Quinn Barnes started his career at Alabama. He's 6'5", 315 pounds. Quincy Wiggins, another big dude from LSU. And then I liked what they did specifically in the secondary. They brought in a guy named DJ McKinney who started at Oklahoma State this past year as a freshman or a redshirt freshman. Deion Sanders has already said that he has a first round talents. McKinney does. And so you have him, and then you bring in Preston Hodge from Liberty, who is also really good and one of the highest graded corners in all of college football, according to PFF. So you have those two guys and Travis Hunter. And I think the secondary not only is looking a lot better, but you're now able to sort of give Travis a break if needed be on defense as well. So they brought in a lot more talent all over the place, and it's really interesting to see how it comes together. Obviously, we haven't really seen them all together because not all of them were there for spring, and even then the spring game's a glorified practice. So week 1 against North Dakota State will be their biggest test on defense. Can they stop the run? Can they get physical? Last year, the answers to both those questions were no.
Deion probably half joking, but he's made comments about North Dakota State not necessarily being the best week 1 opponent because they're not going to be given much credit for the victory, and it's going to be a tough go. All you have to do is look at North Dakota State against some pretty good Power 5 programs over the last 5 to 10 years, and they just about always play it close, if not pull off an upset. So that will be a challenge.
Yep. Yeah, North Dakota State is one of those programs where they've won, I think it's like 9 championships in the past decade or so. They've beaten, I talked about it on my show yesterday, they beat Kansas in 2010. They've beaten Kansas State. They've beaten Minnesota. They beat a top 15 ranked Iowa team, and they're doing this all on the road. So like they don't care who you are. They don't care where you're from. They will beat you. They will embarrass you. And for Colorado, I look at it as one of two ways, right? You can make a statement. They play them on a Thursday night, so I think it's a standalone game on ESPN, and you have a chance to sort of everyone is kind of pushing or expecting Colorado to get upset by North Dakota State. So if you beat them, that's a statement win. Now, if you lose, it's obviously a very tough start to your season, and people will hop on you as much as they did last year when you were under that losing streak. So you have to sort of get ready right away. It's not like you're playing the Citadel. It's not like you're playing one of these FCS programs where it's like you're going to beat them by 60 and pay them $1 million. No, this is a team that fully thinks they could beat you, and they probably, if everything goes right for North Dakota State, can beat Colorado.